So, you just got your hands on a Super Nintendo, or maybe even a Super Retron HD. That's the easy part. But now, you want to play some games that don't break the bank. That's the hard part. The Super Nintendo has some of the most amazing games ever made, but some of them can cost a fortune. And you already know about the games like Super Mario World, Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, and the Donkey Kong Country series, which are affordable must-have games on the SNES. But why don't we take a look at 5 other really good games that you can afford on a tight budget? Let's start with Super Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. This game certainly does have its ups and downs. For one, it's notoriously and ridiculously hard, and some of the levels seem to drag on forever. Throw in some Mode 7 vehicle stages, and you have a great 16-bit Star Wars experience for only around $12. Besides, who doesn't want to relive the classic scene in the movie where Luke fights that big trash monster in the swamps of Dagobah? Want a platformer that sits somewhere between Mario and Sonic, although admittedly not as great as either one? Check out Aero the Acrobat. From the days when seemingly every video game company wanted to have its own mascot, Sunsoft came up with Aero, the high-flying bat whose goal is to rescue his fellow circus performers. Your objectives change on every level. Things like collecting stars, jumping through hoops, and landing on platforms, which keeps it pretty fresh. The graphics are great, and the music is some of the best found on the Super Nintendo. Sometimes the levels can get confusing, and certain objectives seem tedious, but at around $8, this is a great game to start your collection off with. Next on the list, Tecmo Super Bowl. Before Madden dominated the gridiron, Tecmo Super Bowl was the official football game for most fans. The Super Nintendo version is more or less an upgraded port of the original NES version, featuring better graphics and sound, an updated roster, and a few more gameplay features. Tecmo Super Bowl was in fact so good that it's still played competitively today in tournaments and even online, mainly through the use of emulators. If you consider how poorly most football games on the SNES have aged, Tecmo Super Bowl may be the only one you want in your collection, and at around $11, it's really easy to add.
Touchdown!
For the shoot-'em-up fans out there, it doesn't get much better than Super R-Type for only $10. Partially a port of R-Type 2, Super R-Type was the first game in the series to arrive on a Nintendo home console. The game's brutal difficulty is somewhat offset by the crazy amounts of power-ups and upgrades you can collect throughout the game. This is also one of the very few games where slowdown is actually a welcome occurrence. Most of the SNES shmups suffered from slowdown, but you won't mind the action coming to a crawl in Super R-Type when you have about a dozen or more enemies on screen, all gunning for you. Super R-Type really does feature some awesome looking explosions, tons of cool weapons, and a killer soundtrack too. Which brings us to the last game on our list, X-Men Mutant Apocalypse. If this game isn't the best X-Men game of the 16-bit era, it certainly is the most accessible. X-Men and X-Men 2 Clone Wars on Sega Genesis are known for their absolutely savage difficulty, where Mutant Apocalypse is a much more forgiving experience. On one hand, the game can be somewhat repetitive, and even slightly boring in parts. Plus, the mutant powers really seem to be almost an afterthought, as you can beat most levels entirely without them. On the other hand, if you played the Sega Genesis games, it's a really liberating feeling to be able to finally slay your way through enemy grunts like an actual superhero would. The graphics and sound on Mutant Apocalypse are absolutely great, and it's a great feeling to actually feel like a member of the X-Men and not just like an underpowered undergraduate at the Mutant Academy. For $14, this really is a top-tier superhero game on the Super Nintendo. So if you're really looking for some bang for your buck, check out Super Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back, Aero the Acrobat, Tecmo Super Bowl, Super R-Type, and X-Men Mutant Apocalypse. So what are your favorite budget titles on the SNES? Let us know in the comments. That's all we have for today. Game Vault would like to thank you for watching.